called the Calendar Islands, so all the islands off the coast of Maine. And there's 6 of them that the local ferry runs to pretty regularly, multiple times throughout the day. Having a bookmobile has always been like a dream of mine. And there are a lot of food trucks that will go out for the day to park at Peaks or Little Diamond, like one of the islands that we have out in Casco Bay. And man, someday having a bookmobile and being not just because it would be great to be on the main islands during the summer, but being able to go out to an island and run a bookmobile for weekends on the Maine coast would be so much fun. So I don't know anything about the finances or really logistics, legally or otherwise, about doing that, but it would be a lot of fun.
See, I pictured a flotilla where you had like a pontoon bookmobile.
Oh, that's very good.
You could go like
good.
island to island, and then you could like roll up on the beach, like a popsicle cart would or whatever.
Like an amphibious bookmobile kind of.
Yeah. I mean, the real thing to figure out for either of those is just how to display all the zines, and then I think we'd have it all figured out.
Always the most important question.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Ellie Blue, the Vice President of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we welcome Josh Christie, who is the co-owner with Emily Russo of Print, a bookstore in the other Portland, Maine. And so can you tell us a little bit, Josh, about what makes your store special and different from, say, other bookstores?
Sure. And of course, thanks for having me on as well. I've been an admirer of Microcosm for a long time, as you know, from my public presence and hopefully from your sales reports as well. So we are big Microcosm fans.
We've heard tell of your wall of zines.
Indeed. So Print a Bookstore, we opened in 2016, and my business partner, Emily, and I had both spent a number of years working in bookstores. At that point, me for about 12, and I think her for about 7. And we wanted to, and hopefully have achieved with Print, opening a store that was very event-focused. We do 100+ events a year at the store, so a couple events a week all throughout the year. We also we opened the store a week after the election was called for Donald Trump in 2016. So right after that call, we had some very early morning bourbon together, actually, in the office of the store. I bought a bottle on my way in. We sat down and said, we don't want to have a store that is everything to everyone. That's not really our mission. We want a store that reflects our values and reflects our community. So we're going to be unabashedly progressive. We're going to be unabashedly queer. We aren't going to stock things that are right-wing or even things that are terribly centrist, just in the interest of representing everyone. We want a store that represents our community, which I think comes through in what we do at Print and what we sell. And we also had the benefit of being the 4th independent bookstore to open in the city of Portland, which is a pretty small city, the other Portland, as you said, although we might quibble on who's the other Portland. But it meant that things that we weren't passionate about or thought we couldn't do as well as other bookstores in town, super commercial fiction, for example, some stuff like that, we didn't need to stock that at our store because there were other stores that would sell those things. We could lead really hard into the things that we loved, which means a lot of academic and small presses. It does mean zines. It means weird shit, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I think the other thing, sorry, this is a long answer, but the other thing I'll say for what makes Print different is we really try to run a bookseller first, almost democratically run bookstore. There's very little we do in terms of policy decisions, stocking decisions, stuff like that, that hasn't been filtered through talking with our entire team and making sure it's something that fits for all of us, which does make us not unique in the world of bookstores, because there are certainly other bookstores that run that way, including, like Danny Kane, who's one of your authors. His store, he runs, I think, the same way. But it does put us in a minority, I think, at least among independent bookstores.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. I want to go visit Portland and all the bookstores in Portland, Maine now, especially yours.
Yeah.
Why personally, I mean, it sounds like you bring so much like passion to this. What personally brought you into the book selling world?
So I got a degree in political science in college and didn't want to become a lawyer. And it turns out there's very little you can do with a degree in political science if you don't want to become a lawyer and don't want to go into academia. And I started between my freshman and sophomore year in college. I started working summers and then weekends and practically full time for a chain of bookstores in Maine called Sherman's Books. Worked for them all through college, and then after bouncing around a little bit after getting my degree, ended up working for them full time for nearly a decade. Worked as a buyer for them, and eventually helped to design and then open and manage their store in Portland, Maine, which is another one of the stores, as I mentioned, in Portland. And somewhere along the way there, as I was working as a full-time bookseller and also doing some freelance writing and writing a couple books of my own, realized that it could go from kind of an avocation into a vocation. It could go from just a job into a career. And that was how I ended up doing it. And what I think of now as I enter my 20th year doing this, there's a great video game writer, the founder of Bomb, named Josh Christie, who for years his Twitter profile was, I've been writing about video games for years. It would be crazy to do anything else now. And I feel kind of the same way about book selling. Like, I've been doing this so long, what else would I do with myself? So.
Yep. 28th year for me too, and 29th year begins in a month now, less than a month, so that's kind of a wild thing that you fall into. But yeah, but I appreciate that, and and I really appreciate, because we approached it the same way when we really thought of Microcosm as not being all things to all people, and that being sort of intentional. And, when we opened our first store 20 some years ago, people come in and they're like, I'm looking for a murder mystery, or like, I'm looking for like this religious text. And you're like, oh, we don't have that, like go to the other, and they would just be like scandalized. They'd be like, what? Like how, like, how dare you, and then and I, at some point I was like, I bet more stores will go in this direction, because it's just more of a logical direction to have a more curated store, because then you can have people that are actually passionate about the books on the shelves, and you have the other advantage where it's like, then you have a value system that like your customers can buy into. But I don't need to sell you on the merits of the system you've already adopted. But
I always think of, like, it's always hard to draw analogs between bookselling and other industries, because I think that there are so many weirdly unique things about bookselling, many of them wonderful, some of them not. But like, what I always think of is a vegetarian restaurant, and you may have people that come in and complain that they can't get a hamburger, or complain that you are just vegetarian and not not serving something else. That doesn't mean you should start serving hot dogs. It just means that you aren't everything to everyone, and that's okay. And I think in a world where our biggest competitor is Amazon, and they literally advertise themselves as the everything store, it's tempting. But on the other hand, as you know, like, we can't compete with that. So why try to compete with that when we can do our own thing better?
And that's kind of the funny thing. Whereas I was going to say, we don't say the name of that business on this podcast, but We'll make an exception for you, and you.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit more about like your day-to-day role there, like what makes for the most fun days?
Sure. Yeah, I am still very much an on-the-floor bookseller. So day to day, my days are usually 9 to 5, which is nice. And we're open from 11 to 5. So I'll go into the store and often work on orders with my business partner, Emily. She takes a bit more of a lead in the book buying these days, as I do a lot more of the sideline and non-book buying. But we'll work on that and generally talk about everything, you might expect from a small business owner, from HR issues to money management for the store, paying invoices, stuff like that. We work on that together. And then generally speaking, when I don't have an appointment with a sales rep to buy books for the coming season or something like that, I'll be on the store of the floor from when we open to when we close. So from 11 to 5, we get UPS and FedEx shipments throughout the day. So we'll receive that new inventory, put it out on the shelves, work with customers. So that's really the typical day. Starting during the pandemic and continuing now, I'm in the store 4 days a week and work from home 1 day a week. All of our full-time booksellers have a mix of work from home days and in-store days. So it's always a different mix of people in the store. And when I'm working from home, it's some of the remote and larger picture, social media stuff, website stuff, talking with folks on podcasts, stuff like that is what fills up my work from home days.
Oh, well, thanks for including us in your work from home
I
day.
would do this every week if I could. So thank you.
So we have had a bookstore. We closed it before the pandemic. Like, we get it. We have a mix of like work from home and work on site people as well. And I feel like that puts us in a position to kind of understand a little bit more of what it's like to be a bookseller and like what people need in order to hand sell books on the store floor. But also, we're removed from it. And the more we get removed from it, the more we forget. So we're always asking people at bookstores, and I think our audience wants to know this too, like, what do you wish more publishers understood about bookstores?
That's a really great question. And it's hard to answer when we put publishers all in one bucket, because
Yes.
like the things that I wish there's very little actually I can think of that I wish microcosm knew about bookstores. I'm not saying
we would
that
love
just
to know
because I'm
it.
on the podcast.
Yeah, whatever little thing it is.
You can take us to task. You have full access.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think part of it comes from, I think the best publisher sales reps, all of that for booksellers are people that worked in bookselling in one way or another, which you had. So you really understand what the issues are. I think something we run it, and you also have a great sales team. So I think the thing I run into with, I won't name anyone in particular, but larger publishers is really, while there is this great, we all love to talk about how much we love how different all independent bookstores are, and everyone has their own personality. And that's the great thing about independent bookstores, is that we're all different customers do different things, different missions. And the way that most publishers sell their books to us, sell their catalogs to us, is exactly the same across the board. The big like commercial fiction, as I mentioned earlier, for a lot of publishers of fiction, will be a huge part of the lead of their catalog. Starting on the promotional side as well, what we're getting multiple copies of galleys of is these bigger books that don't necessarily appeal to us or to our customers. And it's really tough to hear on the one hand the love for independent bookstores and how different we are, and then on the other be sold everything in the exact same way. I don't know what the solution is, because it would obviously be great for independent bookstores, but probably terrible for publishers if the only things they offered discounts on were the things that we already wanted to buy. Like, I don't think that's how you run a successful sales force, although I don't have any experience with that necessarily. But I think that's the thing that I wish publishers understood about bookstores is really the unique markets and needs for everyone, as opposed to just saying that something they love about bookstores as to actually in some way on the promotional and sales side communicating that they understand that.
I love that. And I love that because whenever you're in a meeting with salespeople, they really talk about stores like yours, and sometimes literally specifying yours as like you're relied upon and thus responsible for trend setting and like creating buzz. And there's no room for what the actual focus of your store is. So they're so like they have a series of books and they're like, these are the lead titles for the season, and we need these ones to like have some amount of excitement around them. There's never a point when they're like, does this actually make sense as an ask? Why would the store care about this agenda that we're pushing on them? So I think you're right. And I have a background in sales. I used to do sales to stores like yours. And, and it was always the thing where like you get the best feedback because a buyer will usually come back very bluntly and be like, no, we would never, ever buy that. But you don't necessarily get the other side of it where that feedback doesn't go up the chain at a bigger company. So like they don't hear what they need to hear from you to be like, no, stores like that are never going to buy books like this. Like that's designed for like a chain in the suburbs. It's not designed for like an urban store that has dedicated customers. And, and I think that I'm sure those are the people that do not partake in our podcast. But so are there other things there that publishers seem to think are important, but doesn't actually matter to you? Like services that they're trying to like, put out a red carpet for you, but you're like, no, that I don't actually care.
Yeah. I think, and again, varies by publisher, but God, swag, if we can talk about swag, which so many big publishers do. And I want to be kind of qualified in my answer because there is so much swag that is like very obviously promotional garbage that does not matter to a bookstore. You can print a beautiful bookmark and send us a stack of them, but most of the time we don't need bookmarks. Postcards, stuff like that. Weirdly enough, it's a lot of the swag that is meant to be customer facing, stuff that we're putting on the counter or putting in a free box to give out to customers. The flip side of that is if publishers send us swag that has some sort of utility, meaning like I still have in my desk here somewhere a publisher branded measuring tape, which I use probably once a week for stuff that I'm doing at the store. You send a ruler, if you send a stack of Post-it notes, as long as the promotion for the book doesn't take up the entirety of the front of the Post-it note. Pens, we need pens at the counter at the store. Like that stuff has utility and makes us, meaning bookstores and our booksellers, think of your publisher, whether it's like the best kind of advertising, because whether it's conscious or subconscious, we're thinking you every single day because we're seeing your logo every single day. And I think that's what's it's flipping your question because it is saying what is important to us, but the thing that is not important to us is most of the swag that we get from publishers, which is really just, I don't know where the money is going in terms of our points on discount from a publisher when they're sending us stuff that's literally going, we didn't ask for, and is going right in the garbage after we get it. Like that seems like it's not the solution to publishing's money woes, but it certainly seems like it's a piece of it that could be considered.
Right, and that's how I would take it too. Where if I, and we have a box in the front of our store, and it would get filled until it was overfilled, and then you just like start putting things straight in the recycling, and then you're like, wait, they're paying to make this. Shouldn't this money go to their employees instead? It's like not.
Yeah.
And
do we need 3 copies of a galley we didn't ask for and aren't buying for the store?
Right.
We don't need one. We certainly don't need three.
Yeah. Well, like back to a positive note, just kind of as you are out there selling books every day and working on your business and kind of thinking about the future, like what is the most important thing to you about book selling?
So I think if I can tie this into a previous question, I think both the most important thing to me about book selling and what I wish most publishers understood more about bookstores is the importance of booksellers. The frontline booksellers at any store are what makes that store work. I think it is not recognized often enough that, um, you know, getting recommendations, books being on the shelf, the store being clean and open, having someone to talk to, like none of that happens without frontline booksellers. So I'll take this opportunity to say that, Emily and I, our store wouldn't be what it is without Amanda, Connor, Steph, and Noah, who are our frontline booksellers at the store. Like that is the most important thing about book selling to me, as someone that has made it into a career and would like to see a world in which it is a possible career path. Not for everyone, not even everyone in a bookstore wants to make it a career, but for people that do, I think it's really important. And I think the other most important thing about book selling to me is connecting with our community. It's really been cool, whether it's running book clubs and events with other community organizations or bringing authors to town that will interest our customers and people in Portland and further afield from Portland, especially when we were doing virtual events. I don't often think of it as like a service that we offer is this kind of connection of people to people, but it really is, along with just, book selling isn't just selling books. It's not a physical, a cash transaction of someone walks into the store, we take their money and we give them a physical book. It's so much more than that. And that's what has kept me doing it for all these years and is going to keep me doing it, because it'd be crazy to do anything else now.
I love that. And like, I love I've been thinking a lot recently. Every time I hear the phrase frontline bookseller, I'm like, where did that phrase come from? I don't think I heard that until a few years ago. It makes it sound like we're at war. And maybe it feels that way too. Like, I mean, based on when you open the shop, I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on where your store is and who your customers are.
What can I ask just kind of your thoughts as a bookseller and a bookstore owner? Like, what would it take to make book selling a sustainable long-term profession?
Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is outside of the hands of both our store and more broadly our industry. I think a single payer healthcare system would be a huge part of that. I think that there are certainly things that stores can do in terms of employee benefits and stuff like that, but higher minimum wages, I think, are great. I think that, but really, like, it sounds like a talking point from 2012, but it's still true. Healthcare is a huge cost. And we're lucky that we're in a position that we fully subsidize 100% of all our employees' health insurance, and we have insurance for everyone, which is a great thing to be able to offer. But on the flip side of that, we could offer more in terms of wages or other benefits if that wasn't something that we were paying for. And every single year when we look at our P&L, all we're really looking at is, my business partner, Emily, and I have no interest in like making a quick buck off of book selling and enriching ourselves. It's all meant to go back to our employees. And when you look at the line items, health insurance is a big one.
Yeah, it's huge for us too.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be a little soapboxy on something that's a little more specific to our industry. Is a lot of publishers, the margin, our discount is a lot less than a lot of other retail. It's between 40 and 50%, whereas most retail is Keystone 50% or more. And that extra couple bucks on every single book we sell, these discounts that haven't changed for 20, 30, 40 years.
Mhm.
A couple more bucks made on every single book, especially for stores that are interested in putting them back into their employees, could be huge. So that's another thing that there perhaps is a little bit more control within our industry to change.
Right. Could give you the budget that was going into all the posters they're mailing you.
Seriously.
So if you heard that, publishers, it's not too late to change your ways. But do you have a funny or actually no. I heard you tell a story on I think it was an ABA Zoom, or maybe it was an IPC Zoom, where you told a story about how you put all the microcosm books in one section in your store. And then this was actually one of the best performing sections of your store. And this is literally what we were asking our sales reps when we were sold by PGW and by IPG and by NBN. We asked them to do that for 20 years, and they were like, oh, no stores would ever do that. That's like a pipe dream. So why did you do that?
Oh, do you want the real answer?
Yeah.
the
real
answer
one is great too.
So the thing is that our store, up until we started carrying zines, we had a policy that was largely built around buying for self-published and small press books, that we didn't want to stock anything that was staple bound rather than having a full binding, because it's very hard to shelve that stuff spine out on a shelf if you're seeing nothing but staples. There's no way to sell it, right? But I wanted to carry zines at the store, and I thought the microcosm was so cool that I was like, well, I will bring in a ton, and there's no way to do this other than clear out about, if I'm doing the math in my head here, probably like 20 plus square feet of slat wall and just dedicate it to nothing but microcosm books. So it was a fault of the fact that there was no other way to shelve your products. It was the only way I could bring them into the store.
Is
but
it a feature or a bug?
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. And it has been really cool to use it. It has helped. It's a big section of the store. It's one of our biggest turn sections of the store. So one of the best selling sections of the store. And as it has grown, it has increased our ability to bring on local zines and small publishers, particularly of poetry, that kind of fit the same trim size and appeal to a lot of the same audience. So that is really what we've done, but it's only grown in size since we did that. And if I hadn't run out of slat wall, we're looking at ways to make the section even bigger. So it's been great.
That's awesome. And that's not the answer I expected, but that's kind of the answer I expected, because I know it's always a logistical, because, I built custom shelving for the very same reason, where I was, when we opened a store, I was like, well, how do you display these things? Like, there's only one way, and it's face out and having very narrow depth, and then just having thousands of them. And we found the same thing.
I teach bookselling. I teach in a bookseller school and teach a couple courses, and one of the courses is on children's bookselling. And part of that is instructing new buyers that you really need to pay attention when you're buying to the trim size of the book, because you have everything from the nutshell library books that are like 2 inches by 2 inches up to like the little Gestalten books that are, I am probably off on this, but feel like they're like 2 feet by 3 feet sometimes.
Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's great though. And I love, and I love it that you've like took a logistical problem and you created a logistical series of solutions.
It's one of the most fun things, and I never would have expected this before we opened print, because I'd never worked as a buyer for non-book products before. And it's one of the fun things about bringing in sidelines, which is, where am I going to put these things when they come into the store? How am I going to sell them? The place we most recently ran into it, and again, the solution has largely been slat wall along with some other things, is we decided to start carrying vinyl records last year, which has been super fun. But figuring out how best to display those. Well, we don't have, record bins at the store or anything like that. how do we make sure that people can look through these? They're another thing that you can't just pile on the shelf together. And it's been really fun to figure that out.
Lightning question. What is the emerging trend that nobody knows about yet?
Oh man, I want to say vinyl just so I can sell more. But in the way that publishing sometimes lags a little bit behind popular culture, but it still seems to be emerging, is craft mocktails, in our cookbook section, which is a big section for the store, and particularly our beverage section, non-alcoholic drinks, people that are either doing dry January and so sober. There has been a huge trend towards more and more drink books about making non-alcoholic drinks, which I think has been really cool.
Yeah,
That is really cool.
We've seen that too. Yeah, where there's more and more of that. And, and so we had done a zine of the Sober Travel Handbook. See, I'm going to tie it all together now. And we just signed the paperback with that author, and and she was stoked. And and it's because of that same thing where we're seeing it, where we're like, oh, people are finally ready for like the like non-alcoholic drinking books, and and so this is like sort of a mishmash of like three aspects of that. So it's not like exactly a cookbook, but we sell a lot of those too. But it's also like sort of tying together a lot of what's out there. Speaking of. And so you write your own books as well. So do you treat this, so you write about like beer and the outdoors, and are these like your passions and your hobbies that you like found there was a lacking requisite book on the shelf, or is this like an extension of your career? Or do you like do this on the weekends? Like, where does this fall into your life and why?
It's definitely weekends. It's been even more weekends since opening my own store with Emily, and really, there's not a lot of time to write. But no, my degree as I mentioned, degrees in political science, but I actually went to the University of Maine in Farmington, and the reason I went was to go into certificate program for outdoor recreation and particularly alpine skiing. And I never really ended up using that certificate in a real career kind of way, but it led me to doing a lot more writing about the outdoors. And then the writing about beer was really kind of fell backwards into, especially as someone that was straight edge earlier in my life, up through the start of college. But I really fell in love with the craft beer industry here in Maine. And after I got my degree, I realized I feel like, you start writing when you go through school, you start writing when you're in like third or fourth grade, and you write all through college. And then unless you go into a career that involves a lot of writing, you just stop like all of a sudden after you graduate from college.
Right.
And I felt like I'd put a lot of years into developing those muscles and they were kind of atrophying. So I was like, well, I'll start blogging about beer. This was 2008, so back when blogging was like the path that all of us were going to take to riches. So I started blogging about beer and had written enough online for free that eventually I started making some pitches and getting hired to do some freelance pieces. And all of that turned into a publisher reaching out to me asking for a book on the history of beer in Maine. So that was the first one. Nice. The second book kind of sprung out of that. And then the two outdoors books, I had also worked as a columnist for our local paper writing about the Maine outdoors. And a local publisher had inquired about basically binding up those columns into a single book. And it was a really wonderful experience, especially because for a good deal of my career before he passed away, my father and I were alternating weeks for writing those columns, either about skiing or about the Maine outdoors. So he and I actually co-authored the two books, The Maine Outdoor Adventure Guide and Skiing Maine.
Nice.
So that was really great.
Nice. Okay. So do you have a funny story about that has maybe occurred inside print that our audience would be entertained by?
I wish I did. If people don't know, for interviews, you often have like the questions beforehand, and I saw that. I've been racking my brain, and I really don't have anything other than our entire staff, myself included, being fairly certain the store is haunted.
Whoa, that's pretty good. Tell
So
us
yeah,
more.
there's a ghost who has been named Howie, who at any old, we're in a 100-plus-year-old building, but it's been many things over its lifespan. And we would eventually find that things seemed to be jumping off the shelves, or lights were doing funny things, or the electricity was doing funny things. And rather than assign those happenings to the fact that we're in a very old building, we assumed, oh, it must be a ghost. So that's Howie, who keeps us all on our toes at the store.
Howie seems like they have the makings of a frontline bookseller. If only
Yes. Luckily, so far, he only seems to chuck books at us and not at customers. So as long as he stays in his lane there, I think we're good.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, next time we'll have Howie on the podcast. But,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Does he do interviews?
Yeah.
Yeah, though I don't think you'll hear anything back, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
We'll send a little Morse code signal through the lights.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, do you have any words of wisdom to part with us, to part with our listeners with?
Go to your local independent bookstore and get to know the booksellers there. That's talking about the most fun parts of the job. Really, in retail, it is easy to complain about customers, but bookstore customers generally are wonderful, as you, I'm sure, know from experience as well. And through our bookstore and through our book clubs, developing genuine friendships and relationships with our customers has really been one of the highlights of the career. And we'd like to think that we're giving good book recommendations and putting the right books in people's hands. But we learn so much about books and about people to be more romantic about it from our customers. So shop at your local independent bookstore. They're great.
Nice. Fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. This has
Yeah.
been an interview with Josh Christie of Print, a bookstore in Portland, Maine. And it's part of our Bookstore Solidarity project series.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.